Okay, so for video 2, I wanted to continue on with where we left off the last time, which was at this desktop. What I wanted to do was grab some of the information that was on one of the previous slides. I'm just going to actually duplicate this. So just right-clicking on this and then duplicate the page. And then you can go back and rename these later. You can always just click rename, so not a big deal. But what I was going to do, I really don't have any use for this because it's just going to get too much on here. But what I was planning on doing is I wanted to show some of the more advanced features that you actually have in here. You can break out different screens and show different things. I don't have enough data on here. I mean, I think I mentioned this before. There's not enough different data on here to really do some of these normal things. Like, it's not financial data or anything, so can't really do KPIs. Very easy. We have a lot of information from different regions and countries and counties, state providences. In the case type, the only breakdown is either confirmed or death. So there's not a lot of variables built into these data sets that allow you to look at some of the normal things that people might look at. So one of the things I wanted to look at was just creating, this is what they call key influencers. So with this, what I was planning on doing, and you click on it here, and I'm just going to be putting information in the analyze and explain by. So for analyze, I'm putting in case type, so it's just a very basic one. There's only 2 case types. And I'll show in a second here one of the things that you the reason why you have to use a smaller variable basically for this. So I got county and region. You can kind of see here real quick. Let me put this out. So it actually does some initial calculations, and this is based on all the data around the world. So I'm going to put a slicer in here that will actually just go back to the United States because it makes it easier to kind of look at the data. But because we only have 2 variables in the case type, this is going to always be 50%. So that's an issue with this data. It would have been nice if they would have, with the data, they would have broken it down a little more, and I'm sure I could have gone through and done that, but I figured they would have done something more like that before even the data. The advantage of something like this is you get to see how things have changed in these different areas. So one of the things I wanted to look at, I wanted to change the case type. If you put in something like, let's say state for the analyze. Notice how it says state. The state has more than 10 unique values and basically it may impact analysis. Well, basically, if you put something in here that's too big, it's not going to be able to calculate anything. So it's nice that it tells you this. So going in, you kind of have to have an idea of what you actually want to use. But like I said, we're just going to go back, and this is a nice thing with the back button. You can just go back to what you actually had before. So there we are. I'm going to get back to the report itself, and one of the things I wanted to do was a slicer. I'm going to do a slicer based on region. So since I mentioned United States, I'm not going to go through and pick out every single thing before, but what I do want to do change that and put the explain by the state or province. So now, this gives a breakdown of the confirmed cases and how they're increasing or even decreasing. If you were to set this up this way, you can have it so it shows only the influencers. Well, the problem is these are all going to be very, very similar for this data because the data set itself is very limited. There's nothing in the top segments because there's only just a couple of things, but you can see how it does change for the different states. But this is kind of an interesting feature that you can look at. And then I wanted to go back through some of the other dashboards that we made before, and actually that was the first one. And this kind of stuff can be changed. As I mentioned before, you can click on these individual for the visuals to be able to show different things. And as you're clicking on this stuff, you can kind of see like, okay, maybe I didn't want to show all of this, and I have no reason to really show the rest of the world on this. As you can see, it says NA because there's too many things buried in here, but you then get a breakdown. So you could then do another slicer off of this that would then go into doing a breakdown of those countries. So I mean, that's the whole point of the visuals, is you can play around with stuff and figure out how you want to break this down. And the more you play with this kind of stuff, the better you get at it. And obviously it helps when you actually know what data you're working with. I kind of wish that there was a little more data built into this, but and then we have these here where we have the county and the state. We have the number of cases, and everything is brought into. If you want to click on an individual city, it tells you, here which state that is, which is kind of cool. It tells you how many people are in the county that are actually infected with it. So it's interesting, and with tiles here, it's another thing. You can click on just the tile. With the funnel, typically you would want to use roughly, 7 or 8 or 9 different things. I used it here really, not in the correct way, but just to kind of show that you can, when you click on these, this is kind of like either yes or no almost with the way it's set up, confirmed versus death. So either it's confirmed or it's not. So if you need death, you click on the death one, and then you can see in the tiles, and then you can go in and look at each individual one, or you can go over here and look at it. There's just a bunch of different ways that you can play around with it and see how, if you click on any of these and you bring it out into focus, you can do this. And then there's another option you can do show data. So similar to that chart that I had up there before where it has the confirmed versus death. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to show additionally is, this is another thing that you can do. You can change the layout on here. So, typically when you actually come up with this information, it usually puts it in the other orientation. So it makes it a little more difficult to see the information. But depending upon what you're actually looking at, you put it up this way. It makes it easier to see it. Okay, so that's pretty much going to be it for right now. I'm going to try to do another video on Tableau, doing something very similar to this, being able to show how Tableau works in relation to Power BI. So if you already have experience with one versus the other, and if I have the time, I might try to do a video that talks about some of the various differences between the two. Because there are some differences, but the reality is most of these platforms are very, very similar. They're going to show you very, very similar visualizations. Sometimes the way that the information goes in is a little different, and I have a little more experience with Power BI than I do with Tableau, and this stuff comes a little more naturally on this, just playing around with it and kind of just roughly knowing where stuff goes. Tableau gives you some hints on stuff, which is kind of nice with certain visuals. So like when you're actually looking at these visualizations, and I'll show this in obviously the next video, it does show some interesting things where like you click on the pie chart and the data that you have up there, it tells you roughly how many different things you need to have in like the different groupings. So in the details, the values, so that if you don't have those, you can't really use that visual. It basically gives you an idea of what's going to work, what's not going to work. So it's kind of nice. Whereas on this, you kind of just have to plug and play and kind of play around with it a little bit and see what actually works for you. So, and I think as anybody works through some of this stuff and you do it a few times, I wouldn't say it becomes second nature, but you kind of just know what stuff's going to work and what stuff's not going to work. Happy visualization.